The first psalm, for example, Wine That Makes, you look, and there's four lines, but if you really study the text, there's a lot more words than just in those four lines. And that's because as I scrambled the notes around, I started using different translations. So
Oh.
that was the conceit. And I thought even if no one knows that, they'll still get this kaleidoscopic view of Scripture.
Hello, my name's Charles Zoll, and I'm the Director of Music and Technology Ministries at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chandler. Today I'm excited to sit down with American composer Michael Torke, whose piece Psalms and Canticles we will be performing later this year. Originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Michael studied at Eastman School of Music and Yale University. His music has been described by Gramophone as some of the most optimistic, joyful, and thoroughly uplifting music to appear in recent years. A finalist for the 2020 Pulitzer Prize, Michael is a very active composer, writing for his own publishing company, Adjustable Music, as well as recording through his own label, Ecstatic Records. I'm so excited to welcome him now and to talk to him about his piece that we will be performing in the fall. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
So we're playing Psalms and Canticles in September, and I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit about the origin of this piece.
Well, I think it was two pieces that I wrote before this. One was a year before, and the other was 30 years before. Um, the one a year before was a piece called Being, which was a recording project that came out in 2020, where it explored certain rhythmic things that were new to me, that comes from a style of music called progressive house. Completely new to me. I didn't know anything about it. I discovered it on YouTube. And that piece 30 years ago was a vocal and ensemble piece called Four Proverbs. And so after doing the composition being was an album length, 9 movement work, and I thought, what if I could use those rhythms and combine those ideas with the vocal ideas of Four Proverbs?
Mm.
And the title would suggest Four Proverbs comes from the book of Proverbs. So there was also this idea of using the Old Testament. Um, and I first was just going to do Psalms, but then it opened up into Lamentations and the Song of Songs or Book of Canticles. So then that became an album project. Because at this point in my career, I'm designing larger pieces, 45 minutes at least, that could fit like on a CD, that all have something in common to make bigger statements rather than a 5-minute piece here or a 10-minute piece there.
So many works in your catalog use Old and New Testament passages, both as the inspiration and the text. So what is it about biblical texts that keeps you coming back for more?
Well, I think number one, I mean, just the sheer poetry
Mm.
that's in the Bible is so amazing and awesome, to use that word in its literal meaning. I think that this idea of looking to Scripture dates all the way back from a teenager, where I started reading the Bible and even thought I would become a priest one day. That didn't happen. I went into music.
Yeah.
So to go back to these texts, there's something I'm familiar with, but I just find them so beautiful,
Mm.
and they inspire musical responses.
Is there a particular translation that you gravitated toward?
Well, that's part of what I want to talk to you about. I
Mm.
actually ended up using 8 different translations.
Oh my gosh.
And that had a compositional reason for it, which I'll talk about. It answers one of your later questions. But when I was growing up, it was the New American Bible. I think it was called, which was the Catholic Bible. I was raised Catholic. And so my parents bought that for me, I think on my 13th birthday. And we had the King James in the house, but this seemed to be, oh, this new translation, and the Catholic Church was behind it. And so that's what I grew up with, which I understand is actually kind of an obscure translation, and it's very different
Mm.
from most of the standard ones.
Okay. So you're going to tell me a little bit more about that. You said 8 translations, but yeah, moving on. What was it about the Songs of Solomon, Lamentations, and these particular psalms that inspired you to write this piece?
Well, the verses have uh, I mean, from I talked about sheer poetry, but what makes it beautiful besides just that the words are glorious is that, they're packed with a lot of meaning and sometimes with moral overtones.
Hmm.
That's more from like Book of Proverbs, but also uh, it's like with a small amount of words, a lot can be said
Hmm.
in a kind of a very rhythmic and graceful way, which I find musical. But if your question is why would I go to those books as opposed to any other, I mean, the Psalms are like pieces of music to
Yeah.
begin with, and the Canticles, the Song of Songs, these are like poetry from one loved one to another, just gushing with emotion. It's almost like a libretto for an opera or something. So to me, they just begged of setting to music.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. Thinking you were going with, especially the Songs of Solomon. They're kind of, I mean, there's a setting of love poems,
Yeah.
essentially. Not
Yes.
too much talk about heaven or God or Jesus.
No.
Yeah.
No. And a lot of the Bible um, doesn't talk about God, even though,
Hmm.
of course, much of it does. But if
Yeah.
you really go through it, you find that there are all of the other areas of life which a lot of us associate with secular ideas that are discussed, which I find very interesting.
Set me as a sail on your heart, as a sail on your arm. For love is strong as death. Set me as a sail on your heart, as a sail on your
So we talked about the text a lot just now. What
Mhm.
about the way you set the text in practice? What I found is that it's very engaging. It's what immediately drew me into the piece because
Mhm. Mhm.
I just discovered it on YouTube, like probably many others. And I hear like a story within a story sometimes when you have added space between syllables and you reprise certain portions of verses. Can you talk about your choices in this text setting practice?
Yeah, I hope I can explain this and it be clear. Back to the earlier piece, Book of Proverbs. The compositional conceit in that work was that these short, pithy phrases, I attached the melodies of the notes to the syllables of the proverb. And then when I started organizing or developing it musically as the notes moved around, those syllables would ride along with it as if it were a flag on top of the note. So hence the syntax would get all scrambled up.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, that would be really interesting because then you're kind of showing these signifiers to the listener of what I'm doing with the notes. But over and above that, when the notes would recombine later in the piece, then the meaning of the proverb would come back into
Hmm.
focus. So I thought that kind of synergy was really interesting. That's what I was going to do, that exact technique for Psalms and Canticles. But when I got going, it started, I mean, the kind of like Lewis Carroll nonsense that ensues is, I think, intellectually interesting, but I'm not always so sure that as that delivers the kind of emotion that I want. Um, and so then I realized, okay, I move these notes around, and then but the words don't fit anymore. But if I put all these Bibles or translations in front of me, I can find this one where it's said just in a different way, where this time it uses three syllables rather than two. And
Hmm.
then I would put that in. And then the ideas get a little bit scrambled, but everything makes sense. So you can just listen to it and you hear the first psalm, for example, Wine That Makes. You look and I just, there's four lines. But if you really study the text, there's a lot more words than just in those four lines. And that's because as I scrambled the notes around, I started using different translations. So
Oh,
that was the conceit. And I thought, even if no one knows that, they'll still get this kaleidoscopic view of Scripture.
Right. Wow, that's a great visual for me, a kaleidoscopic view of scripture. That
Hmm.
could be like a dissertation paper title, something like that.
It could be.
Wine that makes the heart of man glad, oil to make his face to shine, and bread that strengthens man's heart, and wine that makes the heart of man glad, oil to make his face to shine, and bread that strengthens. The earth is filled
Well, so a lot of composers will start with a text and then they'll set that to music. And it sounds like you were working with the two worlds at once, moving them around to get the music to fit the text and the text to fit the
And
music.
actually, I to come to be even more piercing with that, I usually start with the music
Hmm.
and then try to find a way for the words to fit. And everyone is like, oh, you got to start with the words. But I heard even back in the old history of Broadway, there were composers who were lyricists that were given finished melodies and they had to write words to it. So that isn't such a new idea.
Yeah,
And of course, the music is so important.
right.
So why not start with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. As a composer, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Oh, good.
So this piece, like so much of your music, really, really grooves. And just as a purely selfish question, because I will be conducting, how do
Oh,
you see the role of the conductor in this piece?
well, I mean, it's sort of a no, no, no. It isn't an obvious answer in a way. I think that the conductor has to inspire the musicians and especially the singer to feel those rhythms because some of the rhythms aren't natural. They may look simple on the page, but they're actually difficult to execute. And some of them, progressive house is based on certain West African tropes that we find in Brazilian music and then we find almost in like some rap music. I mean, it's this whole wonderful thing of the world just kind of mixing together all these different ideas. But and in South American music, there's an idea of the clave, which is like
Mhm.
hearing three against two that for South Americans or Africans just comes really naturally, but not always for even trained classical musicians. So I think a conductor's role, I mean, obviously, is to give a very clear beat, but it's to inspire them to feel that as a kind of physically natural thing as opposed to a intellectually, I have to put the 16th note here. There's no way that music is going to happen. It has to be felt. And so if you can inspire them how natural that is and don't tell them that it's hard, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, great. Yeah, that helps me. Thank you. So, talking about your music as a whole, again, it's really accessible. I've listened to the recording of Psalms and Canticles sung by Lydia Brown, who's pictured here on the piano back here,
Yes, that's her.
probably 100 times, if I'm honest. That YouTube
Wow.
video view count is as high because of me. I'm just kidding, but
I
often
thank
I'm
you for
listening.
that.
Yeah, often I'm listening on long drives, and it serves as a great road music. It serves as a great concert music, sitting down and listening to it. Of course, post minimalism comes out of like the Philip Glass, roll out a rug on the grass and just listen as the music washes over you. Yours
Mhm.
takes a different approach, of course. But I'm wondering how you hope your music is enjoyed. Is it purely in a concert hall setting, or do you hope for a cafe or a car, or like progressive house music in a club, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy in whatever way the music might be used. Um, and you never know how it is, especially nowadays with the young kids streaming everything as opposed to buying a recording, a physical recording and putting it on. And so what happens is you get these playlists which are all in kind of one mood. And there is something characteristic of Psalms and Canticles is that in a sense, there are all kinds of different colors and different moods,
Mhm.
but there is a kind of a general feeling all the way through it, as opposed to a symphony having the allegro movement and the scherzo movement and the slow movement and the finale. It's a kind of a different approach, which I think has been inspired to me by listening practices of younger people. And you know what they all do? They all come home, they take their homework home, and then they put in their earbuds and they
Mhm.
listen to music while they do their homework, of all things. And it's far from me to judge if that's the role of music these days. Great, I think it's great. So if someone is listening while they're driving, if I have a friend who's a writer for the New Yorker magazine, and she told me when this album came out that she puts it on her personal bedside stereo and turns it on before she goes to sleep every night. Somehow she thought that the music, I don't know what she enjoyed listening to it, but it calmed her down, and that was her ritual to go to sleep. I mean, I was flattered by that. A choreographer that I worked with the National Ballet of Canada, he wrote to me and said, I mean, I know that this is all about scripture and all about the Bible, but I want to set it to dance. And so just last year in Toronto, he choreographed the entire album. And
Fantastic.
he used this was something that he used the children at the school of the National Ballet of Canada. So it was like a children and adults. It was kind of like this whole world of movement, and I found it very moving. So in whatever way, it has been performed live in Rome. That's where the premiere came about. But yours would be the second performance
Wow. Wow.
and the
That's
American premiere, which you can advertise if you want.
Is it really the American premiere?
Yes.
The weight of responsibility just
No, I
felt a
shouldn't
lot
say-
heavier.
no, no, no. I'm delighted you're doing it.
Well, I'm taking the project very, very seriously. And like I wrote to you in that email, I applied for several grants because I believe that musicians should be fairly compensated. And, you know,
I agree.
yeah, often
Definitely.
performing contemporary classical music is a labor of love rather than a labor of, paycheck. But I think it should be possible that players are paid and venues are established where new music can happen.
Well, and I'm excited that it's happening in the Phoenix area because it is really important that new music be done in the communities, not just in city centers like New York or LA. So I really commend you for putting this together.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Deep waters cannot quench love, no flood sweep it away. We're one Deep waters cannot quench love, no flood sweep it away. We're one offer all he owns to purchase love. Deep waters cannot quench love.
Color plays a major role in your music. Is there any non-musical discipline that also piques your interest and inspires your music?
I always want to say that my musical ideas come completely as just simply musical ideas, meaning like, the way jazz musicians talk. They go to a piano and just say, all right, this add nine chord, and then I resolve it to there. And anyone listening is like, what? That doesn't mean anything. But they're like, yeah, yeah, and that really works this way, and it sounds so juicy if we go here and blah, blah, blah. That's the way I think about music. And I always say in presentations that nothing in the outside world inspires me. It's all this energy inside that I'm trying to sift through. And it's a good thing that we have the arts, because imagine if we didn't, all of that energy would have to find a way. Maybe I'd be a murderer or something, because there's all this energy that has to get out. But that isn't really true, because I read all the time. I read fiction and nonfiction. I love architecture. I love going to museums. And, my idea of spending a Sunday in New York City, I spend half the time in New York, is to go to the Metropolitan Museum. I have a membership now, so I can just walk in and I'll just take one room and look at those paintings for an hour, and then I'll leave. And that to me is just so uplifting. I guess though that when we talk about influence, I don't like see an Italian Renaissance painting and say, "Oh, I want to respond to that." But the ideas of life and beauty, I think all play into the imagination and it comes out this way. I don't live in a vacuum. And as I was saying before, the sheer beauty of Scripture, why don't I just admit it inspires me? Because when I'm given a libretto, let's say, if I'm working on an opera and it doesn't inspire me, meaning I don't like how it's written, I find that I don't have any musical ideas. So I think that all of these things in the arts do work their way, but somehow not directly.
Shout for joy, all shout to the Lord and serve with gladness. Come before His presence singing. Enter his gates with praise and
So, are you currently working on any music right now, or any projects that you'd like our audience to know about?
Well, yeah, I'm finishing up a new album length again. But what does that mean? It means above 45 minutes of music that comfortably fits on a CD. And it's for solo violin and string orchestra. And it's very moody. Everything is slow, and it's meant to bring a kind of a feeling of consolation, a feeling not necessarily of sadness, but of warmth. And I'm hoping to even find some new listeners because I know that there's a lot of people that these days in these, I don't want to say troubled times, but confusing times, people use music as a way to kind of put themselves back together. I'm very interested in that. So this album, it's called Last, kind of a weird title for an album. Last. It's not my
It's
last
not.
album, but each movement is like last week, last month, last Thursday, last winter. Everything is kind of looking back and being reflective. And the first single will come out at the end of August, and the full album will come out in November. Very excited about it.
Great. Where can people find that when that comes out?
When it's finally released, it'll be all over, Spotify, Apple Music. It'll be on YouTube. I'll probably put the whole thing on YouTube even ahead of, because I have my own YouTube channel, ahead of the official release on November 21st. But wherever you find music, you will find it because I have a good distributor. It gets out.
Cool, cool. Yeah, and just to go back to one thing you mentioned, the students that go home and put on a playlist while they're doing writing a paper,
Homework.
yeah, or
Yeah.
doing homework. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, your music, it's not reductive to say that your music serves that purpose as well as holds its own in a concert hall setting. That's what's so cool
Well, I
about
have
it.
thoughts about that because as a student, when I went to music school, I thought a lot about music and what it meant to write contemporary music. And I thought, what is it about Bach and Mozart where it is some of the most advanced music ever written by a human being, which you can study, you can write papers on, you can go to the concert hall, you can put every brain cell, but you can put it on the background when you're doing the dishes, and it's pretty good
Yeah,
and kind of like fills up the room, and you don't have to listen to it because there was this thought, especially when I was in school, that contemporary music was an intellectual exercise and you had to use all of your brain. And I said, well, if you stop using all of your brain for this really complicated music, there's nothing else to enjoy. I'm all for using all of your brain, but I want to write a kind of music that fits both purposes because I believe that the masters in the past did that just as well.
mm,
And that's where a lot of this kind of expression comes from, where you can listen to it with your brain up close, or you can put it on the background. And I'm just as happy with either practice.
All right, Michael, it was an absolute pleasure speaking to you and getting to know more about your music. We'll be performing your piece, Psalms and Canticles, on Friday, September 12th at 7 p.m. at Paradise Valley United Methodist Church, and Saturday, September 13th at 2 p.m. at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chandler. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you.
And his courts with praise. Give thanks to